Welcome to Mid-City Church Online. My name's Katie, and I am so glad that you're here today. Before we get started, I want to invite you to take out your cell phone and text the word HERE, H-E-R-E, to the phone number 225-307-0662. When you do that, you'll get a text back with an opportunity to fill out a Connect card and an opportunity to give today. I really want to encourage you to do both of those things as you watch. While we're continuing our Asking for a Friend series today, we have a special guest with us that I know you're gonna love. I'm so excited. Get ready because worship begins now.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars are made to worship, so will I can see your heart in everything you've made. Every burning star, signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises, so will I. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty your voice. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature, so will I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. So every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so will I, like you would again 100 billion times. But what measure could amount to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind.
Hey everyone, I'm so glad you are joining us for week 2 of Asking for a Friend. And today we're going to talk about science and religion and can they coexist. But I promised you that I would be introducing you to some of my friends. So this week I want to introduce you to Reverend Brady Witten. Reverend Brady is the senior pastor at First United Methodist Church, our mother church. And I'm so excited. Reverend Brady is really into astrology right now. Is that the right term? Astronomy.
Yeah, pastors are not supposed to be into astrology, right?
Astronomy.
The study of the stars, right? Yeah.
Yes. And I've been meaning to go over and see some stars at night, but it's been raining every single day. And so I look forward to someday being able to do that. But I'll ask you the question. Can science and religion coexist?
Well, first I want to say hi to everybody, and thanks, Fernie, for having me. And I look forward to having you and Susie and anybody else you want to bring with you over to Mouse at like 4 a.m. to look at some stars, because right now that's about the time you have to come out. But anyway, so I do want to. This is a topic that I'm passionate about for lots of different reasons. One of them is I have some kids that are in school, and they're learning science, and they're learning kind of the modern way of looking at the world, and they bring a lot of these questions to me, and so it's something I find myself thinking about quite a bit. But I guess I'll start by saying this. I think that people who think there is that religion and science are at odds with one another, in some ways kind of have a misunderstanding about both. And so I want to dig into that a little bit. And I don't have time. There's probably, we could talk about this for like an hour.
Oh, yeah.
But I've been told we have about 10 minutes. So we're going to try to keep this short. But I want to start by showing you some things, even though we were going to try to get you over to my house and look at some telescopes and things like that. But I did bring some pictures to share with you all, just to give you a sense of kind of, first of all, one of my passions, which is astronomy. And also I think it'll help us with this conversation. So I want to show you some pictures. I'm going to show them to Fernie here on this laptop. So the first thing I want to show you, and this is a picture that I took, which I'm impressed with myself over. This is called Hercules cluster, okay? And it's what's known as a globular cluster. And there's a bunch of these. I don't know how many. I've seen probably just through my telescopes, about 5 or 6 different ones of these that are just up right now. But these they orbit our galaxy. So we live in the Milky Way, right? They orbit our galaxy. Now what's cool about these, so you can see this, there is somewhere in the neighborhood of several 100,000 stars in this cluster. So you got to remember, our sun is a star, right? So y'all are seeing these pictures too. So this cluster of stars is a cluster of suns, and there's several 100,000 suns in one of these globular clusters. Now remember, I said they orbit around our galaxy, right? So we live in the Milky Way. And you know how many stars there are in the Milky Way? What would you guess?
Thousands?
No. So there's 100 or so thousand stars just in this cluster, and this cluster orbits our galaxy, right?
Yeah.
So the Milky Way galaxy, this is where, has somewhere between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. Now that's a pretty big difference, right? But so we're going to talk about science a little bit. So this is science tells us there's somewhere between 100 billion and 400 billion stars just in our galaxy. Okay.
Wow.
Now, here's another cool thing. So there's another picture. This one is called Markarian's chain. And again, I just want to kind of give you a sense of the size of the, this universe that we live in, right? So this is Markarian's chain. This is a cluster of galaxies that's located in Virgo. So it's located in the constellation of Virgo. So in this picture alone, I think I've counted somewhere close to 20 galaxies. So remember, I said in our galaxy, the Milky Way, there's like between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. We are just one galaxy in really an infinite number of galaxies in the universe, right? So here's a picture of, here's about 20 you can just see in this picture alone. But in this cluster of it's known as the Virgo galaxy cluster. Okay, so remember the cluster of stars. We also have clusters of galaxies. In this cluster alone, there's about 1,300 galaxies. Wow. So imagine how many stars are we talking about?
More than I can count.
It's this unbelievable number, right? And then last picture I wanted to show you is kind of our. This is just of the Milky Way, which is the galaxy we live in. I did not take this picture. I did take that last one though. So this picture shows you. So the little square here. This is the Milky Way. If you ever go out at night and it's really really dark and you're in a dark place and it's the right time of the night in the year, you can see this kind of cloud structure in the sky that's a portion of our galaxy. And we live in the Milky Way, right? So this square right here, all of these are stars and galaxies right in there. And it just kind of gives you a sense of why it's so difficult to count the number of stars, why it's so difficult to count the number of galaxies. So this is just a pinpoint sized amount of space and how many stars and galaxies are just right there.
Wow.
So it's really pretty unbelievable. But I go back to this idea that so people who think that science and religion are at odds with one another, I think have a misunderstanding of religion and science. And so I want to try to give you a definition of each, okay? So science is the systematic study of the natural world through observation and experiment. Okay, so so most of you, if you've gone to school, you know this. So we're observing the natural world, observing the physical world, and we're using experiments and observation in order to reveal truths from the natural world, right? That's science. Religion is a different thing. Religion is the human understanding of the absolute, which is one way to talk about God, the spiritual or the divine. It's our understanding of and our relationship to those things, right? So Ferdy and I were talking before we came here. So I had open heart surgery about 4 years ago, right? And so I literally, this is another reason I love science, right? So science has given us all these wonderful medical advances, right? And so some scientists cut open my chest and were able to move some things around and fix my heart, right? Mm-hmm. And I would not call Fernie, who is not a scientist, to do that for me, right? So they were able to fix my physical heart. But I'll tell you this, if I had a heartbreak, if I was struggling in a relationship, or I was questioning my place in the universe, or I was dealing with some other things, I wouldn't go to one of those scientists. I would come to you, right? Mm-hmm. And so again, science and religion they do different things. And I think where we run into trouble is where when we try to make science into religion, or sometimes some religious people try to make religion into science. And they're different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was reading an Adam Hamilton book in my research this week, and he talks about how science can point us to like how God works and how God creates and how God does those things.
Right.
Whereas religion can tell us about like who God is and like point us to God.
God's character, God's nature.
Yeah,
right.
But they're two, like you said, two very different things.
Right. Yeah, I think the how-to is the key, right?
Yeah,
so I was thinking about it this way. So science can tell me how my computer works, right? And even create a computer. Science is a wonderful and a powerful thing, right? But science is not what's going to inspire me to open up that computer and write a song or write a poem or to do these more meaningful things in life. Science isn't going to help, science isn't going to help me necessarily to find my meaning in life, right? Maybe if you're a scientist, doing science is meaningful, but there's still these ultimate questions. One thing I wanted to share with you all is there is a growing number of scientists who really kind of accept the fact that human reason has limitations, right? In some ways, science is the exercise of human reason, and reason is a very powerful thing, right? But again, I think we make a mistake when we think that science is going to answer all of our questions. And so there are a growing number of scientists who recognize that human reason has its limitations, and therefore science is going to have limitations. One of those guys is a guy named Edward Witten, and I think we're going to include a link to an article from Scientific American that talks about Edward Witten. And what Witten is saying now is the title of the article is "The World's Smartest Physicist Thinks Science Can't Crack Consciousness." Okay? And so, and what he's saying is, when it comes to certain things, our ability to observe them and our ability to experiment are never going to answer these big questions. And I think probably one of the biggest questions is where does consciousness come from, right? And in particular, Now, some of you will argue with this when it comes to your pets and things like that, but why is it that human beings seem to have this level of consciousness or self-awareness that maybe some other beings don't have? Like, so this guy, Edward Witten, is saying there was a point in time where scientists might have thought, hey, we'll be able to answer those questions one day, but they're actually getting to the point where they're saying maybe not. And that science, science can explain maybe how the universe works. Like we can take the Big Bang, for example, and we could say, well, a single particle exploded into multiple particles, and time and heat and all that kind of stuff created, the creation came out of that. But it still can't answer the question, okay, but what came before the Big Bang? Like what started all of that? What is it that created the laws that made all of that? Like we can map the laws, and we've been doing that for hundreds of years now, but where did they come from? What was the start of all of that? And if the start of that is God, which I believe it is, who is this God? What is he like? What does he want for life? What does he want for us? What's the point and purpose of all of this? Science is never going to be able to answer those kinds of questions.
I remember when I think it was middle school or elementary school, learning about creationism, and at the same time learning about the creation story.
Right.
And I remember always wrestling with those two. Like it always felt like they contradicted one another.
Right.
But as you're talking, it makes me think maybe they didn't contradict each other. Maybe they just support each other in different ways.
Yeah, I think they're trying to accomplish different things. So yeah, if you look in Genesis chapter 1, we have this whole story, and this is there's two creation stories in Genesis, but the first one here is in Genesis 1:1, and the famous thing here is that it says it took God 6 days, and so there are some people who read the scriptures, and this is where I was talking before. They're going to try to make the religion into science, and they're going to say, well, the Bible says that God created in 6 days, but science has shown us that the creation really has taken billions of years to unfold, right? And so some people would say, see, they contradict one another, and if you're religious, you can't accept science, or if you're a scientist, you can't accept religion. And what I would say is the purpose of the scriptural writing is to talk to us about God and about God's self-giving power and the way he unleashed into the world and gave permission in the world for things to come about. And that it's not important that, the important thing here is not how many days it took, And so I think science, looking at carbon dating and all that kind of stuff, has shown us that the universe came about over billions of years, right? And is still becoming, I believe. And what the creation story says is, in the beginning, God, that there is a God, there is an intelligence and a power behind all of this. And I don't think those two things are at odds with one another. So I loved what you were saying about Adam Hamilton saying science might give us the how-to, but the religion will tell us the who and maybe the why, and I think those are just very different questions. And so I do not have a problem embracing scientific theories like the Big Bang, scientific theories like evolution, although evolution, there's some holes in it if you study it. It's a theory. My kids come back from science class and they're like, well, Daddy, evolution, and I kind of go, wait a minute, there's some problems. Here's one of the problems with evolution, and I don't know the exact date, the timelines of this, but there was a point in time that the fossil record shows where there was an explosion of life. And it's like, so there's like nothing, or there's a few living things, and all of a sudden there's this explosion of all of this complex life. And it seems to have happened all at once, okay? So that kind of, and that's science, okay? And so we kind of have to question, is it this sort of like gradual emerging of life over time, or are there different explosions where things sort of take off a little bit? And again, so I think evolution does not answer everything. And again, this is where I think even the kind of our scientific thinking in our modern world gets us in trouble sometimes, because we want to make science into the answer to everything, but it's not. It's not. So, I can say one thing for me. So, like, I showed you these pictures of this outer space, right? And I love to look at space stuff. I'll sit up all night and just stare out into the stars, and it's wonderful. Like, science has given me the how-to to do that. Like, scientists invented my telescopes, and scientists have mapped these things out. And when I look at the stars, I can tell you certain things about them, right? But at the same time, when I'm looking at the stars, I also start to ask these deeper questions, like, well, who am I in the midst of this massive universe? And what is the universe, like, what am I supposed to be doing? And what's this all all about. And science can't answer those questions, right? But I will tell you this, I'll give you a little witness here. Religion has helped me to find some of those answers. And I guess I'll say it more specifically, religion has helped me to know the one who is the answer. Right, and I really do. I'm a person who believes in God, and I believe there is an intelligence and there is a power at work in this universe, and that science. Hey, maybe God's a scientist. Actually, I would kind of say I think God is a scientist. But where science has helped me to explore the universe in some really kind of awesome ways. It also has raised some questions that I personally have found answered in God and in Jesus. And so I would just ask all of you at home, like, don't when you run into somebody who kind of shuts down maybe your religious thinking via science, just challenge that a little bit and say, no, wait a minute. But similarly, if you're one of those people who wants to make your religion into science, I wouldn't do that either. So these are different tools. They have different functions. And again, for me, as a person who for a long time in my life was really searching for heart and soul answers. No science textbook was going to answer those for me, but having a relationship with Jesus has. And so
that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
As I was looking at the pictures, one of the things that came to mind was how small I am in this vast universe.
Right.
But it also made me think about how small my struggles are compared to this vast universe in some ways. And it gave me a glimpse to like how vast God is. And I don't know, it like you said, I started thinking about a whole bunch of different questions and different I started seeing God through a new way, a new lens, as science, when I was willing to look through the lens of science.
Right.
And that's, I don't know, for me, it was very comforting. This might sound weird. It was very comforting to feel so small.
I think it can be, yeah. So it's funny. So we're not the first. I always tell people we're not the first people to ask these kinds of questions, right? So there was a point in time, most of us can't do it now, where a person could walk outside and look up at the stars and literally see millions of stars. Like when I go outside now in my backyard in Baton Rouge, we live pretty close to the city. On a good night, I might be able to see maybe 100 stars, which still is pretty like wow, but it's nothing like what you can see if you go to a really, really dark place. But anyway, so the writer of Psalms, and wrote in Psalm 8, says, you have set your glory above the heavens. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them? And so somebody thousands of years ago looked up at the stars and had some of the same thoughts, well, wow, who am I? I'm so small, But here's what I think the scriptures really point to. In some ways, we are teeny tiny and insignificant, but in other ways, we matter intimately to God, right? So this whole idea that God loves us so much that God came into human history in the person of Jesus. So, and I think somehow, I always tell people, when I get a little too full of myself or a little too worried about my own individual situation, it's great to go out and consider how vast and massive everything is. But there are other times where you maybe feel a little lost. And then it's important to remember that, as Jesus says, God knows the hairs on your head, and you're of great value to God, So I think kind of trying to live between those two places is what it means to be human, which is a pretty amazing thing.
I love that. Well, and even to the same God who created those galaxies and those stars and was so intentional about the laws of how they work and they function is the same God who created you and I and everybody who's watching at home.
Right.
And I don't know, but and this might I'm still processing my theology through this, but during Christmas, Susie and I like to build gingerbread houses, and we're very intentional, and we're so proud of what we've created and love it. And if I can love a gingerbread house that much, like how much more God looks at all of creation and says, and is in love with it and cares about it. And
when I had my first child, who's 16 now, I remember saying to an older mentor of mine who I knew had children who were fully grown, and I said, I'm so in love with this little thing, and I said, and I'm so fascinated by her, And I said, I guess at some point in time, that kind of the newness of it wears off. And this guy said to me, it never does. It never does. And so, yeah, I mean, over and over again, the scriptures describe the love of a parent for a child, right? And if you think you love gingerbread houses, if you're ever blessed to have a child, you know, it's an amazing love.
Yeah. Well, so I guess final verdict: religion and science can coexist.
Yeah, I think they are both important ways of engaging the world. If I had to pick one, I would take religion. That's just me. I'm a pastor. That's what I should say. But I also love all that science has done for humanity. I mean, you know, again, science and scientists and medical technology saved my life. I think they're a gift from God. Like, I think our reason is a gift from God. But that science is never going to answer our ultimate questions. And, you know, I go back to, well, maybe this is kind of a little bit like when I'm taking my last breath, I want a religious understanding of life. A scientific one, I'm not so sure would be helpful.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep.
I love that. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us. I hope that you will continue to have these conversations with friends, colleagues, families, and the way you can do that is by texting the word GROW, G-R-O-W, to the number 225-307-0662. And you'll get a link back to a home sheet. And the home sheet's going to contain all the scriptures we talked about today. It's going to contain some questions for you to continue wrestling with this and having conversations with coworkers, wherever you are, with whoever you want. And it's also going to include an action plan to how to continue to wrestle with this whole week and even beyond that. So again, it's GROW, G-R-O-W, to the number 225-307-0662. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to next week as we continue this sermon series, Asking for a Friend. Take care, and I'll see you next week. And remember, I love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'll see you next week.